Okay, so there are two things I'd like to mention while beginning. The first is that standing up on stage is a horrible time to receive a sermon about how I should switch to a tiling window manager. The second is that I now have a root shell on Mike Osmond's laptop. All right, so who here came for Apple O Day? No, get out. So this is the Apple iPod, everybody wants one, all the kids are listening to them these days. But this is an Antiforensics iPod. If you were to steal this iPod from my hotel room for a minute and try to make a disk image of it, what would happen is twofold. First, the iPod would erase everything that it had. Every time you would read a sector, it would be overwritten. And second, it would be overwritten with Rick Astley lyrics. The purpose of this is twofold. First, so that I could know that something was copied off of my iPod. And second, so that your copy of my iPod would be useless. So in the lecture today, I'm going to be explaining first what an anti-forensics disk is, how to build one, and how to build a better one. This all began, as many things do, with useless or poorly written standards. If you want to learn how to build a USB mass storage device, the absolute worst thing you can possibly read is the USB mass storage standard, because it's 17 pages and it doesn't actually tell you how to read or write a sector. It's not intended to be read, it's intended to settle arguments between competing vendors. This is from a Russian construction forum, and the subtitle to this piece is, it's called Pigeonholes as a demotivator. And the subtitle is, "Truth can be found here, but good fucking luck." This is made possible because of a collaboration that I made on the Face Dancer project with Sergey Bratis and the students at Dartmouth College. It also relies upon some tricks that Colin Mulliner published in a paper on time of check to time of use attacks, in which he jailbroke a Samsung television by reprogramming a Nokia N900. And also to Dmitry Dodospasov, who, I pronounced his name correctly for the first time. Thank you kindly. When German customs, let's not clap for German customs, they seized every single piece of prototype hardware that I mailed myself from the States. So Dmitry used a milling machine to mill out the first prototype PCB for me. And then German customs seized every single piece of components that came from the States. So Dmitry helpfully ordered the parts himself, and we met at a shady bar. And he said, "Hey, Travis, you got my money?" And I'm like, "Of course I got your money. You got my shit?" And then I passed him a wad of euros, and he passed me an envelope, and everyone in the room thought they saw a major drug deal, and it was great. And I can finally, after almost a year of talking about hard disk exploits, explain why the hell I keep citing my friends at Eurocom and ECH Zurich. And I'll get to that later on in the presentation, but the gist is that you can go a level lower than an iPod. Now, you think of a disk as a block device, but it's actually a computer that is talking to your computer over a network. And at this point, someone's hand goes up and he says, "But it's a bus, not a network." And if Sergey were with me, he would then throw a beer bottle at that person and say, a bus is the same thing as a network. When you're speaking over SCSI or USB or SATA, there's nothing intrinsically different about those protocols and Ethernet. I mean, Ethernet is no more different from them than they are from each other. The only difference is that from user land, you can very frequently talk in the higher levels of Ethernet. In USB, you're not supposed to be able to do this. Loopholes are made, but in general, Ethernet and regular IP networking is something that you as a normal programmer are allowed to play with. And USB is supposed to be something that you're not supposed to play with. But we can build a bus adapter. I'd like to ask you to read the fucking papers. This is a rather technical topic, and it has This PDF viewer is crap. At least it's not OpenOffice. All right, so among them you want to read a paper called Read It Twice by Colin Mulliner. This explains how to swap out sectors beneath a file system so that the host will read the same file twice but with different contents. Also, in the International Journal of Proof of Concept, or Gut the Fuck Out, the very first issue, of which Mike Osmond gave me a few copies here. Mind the license, though. It's illegal for you to read this unless you print at least 2 pirate copies to share with other people. I have the prose version of how to do this, including source code that you can compile into your iPod. At my blog, I'll have descriptions of how to use the face dancer board, and your badge is also a face dancer board for performing many of these experiments. And at ACSAC in December, we'll be coming out with a lovely new project that I'll get to toward the end. Now, prior anti-forensics work, read the Gruggs articles, particularly as one from FRAC. And then Int80 has a number of presentations that are just fun to watch, in which he explains different annoying tricks that you can use to mess with a forensics investigator. For example, he sprays every unused portion of a disk with image headers and with file headers. So when they start doing image recovery, there's millions of copies of Godspeed for the guy to look through. This is the very first prototype of the face dancer board. It is a device for emulating USB hosts and devices using regular Python code. This has since been slimmed up, but it came from a lecture in 2012 that Sergey Bradis and I presented, in which Sergey, who can be seen here on the right, unlike Miss Frizzly, wants the bus to crash. It's just a network. So with the network adapter, you can begin speaking on the network, and that's what the face dancer allows you to do. So you can write a USB device in Python, and you can do it without having to involve the operating system. It's the same Python code that runs on Linux or Mac or Windows, and you can do everything at no lower a level than is strictly necessary. There's no reason why you should have to write this sort of code inside of the Linux kernel when you can get away with doing it in userland. At Breakpoint, I showed how to do device firmware update emulation, so you can actually catch firmware updates intended for other devices and then replay them. And at the 29th Congress, I showed how to do mass storage emulation, so that you can emulate a disk, and how to prototype anti-forensics techniques in that disk. At Recon in 2013, we released a rewritten version of this in Python 3. It's not that Python 3 is a better language, but it is that the rewrite makes the thing less ugly. If you use the Python 2 version, you have my sincerest apologies for having to read my code. So this is the face dancer. The left side goes into your workstation. The right side goes into the other workstation. And then you just run a Python script, and it connects through that FTDI chip on the right. In the middle, there's an MSP430 microcontroller, and on the far right, there's a MAX3420 USB controller chip. And they're just sort of set up in a line with the 2 plugs on the end. Now, what the Maxim chip does is it handles all of the awkward pieces of the USB protocol. So USB requires you to automatically I bet this is auto-advancing. Damn you, Mike. That'll work. All right, so anyways, this chip handles all of the fancy timing requirements. So when USB talks to the device, it needs to hear back immediately. A proper response is, I'm busy, fuck off for a minute. But it has to send that within 15 microseconds, which the host can't do. So this chip takes care of the timing, and it takes care of buffering the packets so that they go all at once. And this is how the extra time delay caused by going over two different chips to get back to another USB bus does not make the device too slow to perform on a modern machine. And when you start fuzzing device drivers, everything crashes. It's magic. Like here, we were fuzzing the USB keyboard, the keyboard interface. It's called the human interface device. These bugs can also be triggered over Bluetooth. And we wound up crashing the NVIDIA driver. You get weirder crashes. Skype will crash if you fuzz the mouse on OS X. Now, we give these boards away for free or cheap. So people who do have money pay for shipping. People who don't have money just get them in the mail. And you already have one on your badge. And you'll recognize the pieces of your badge from the diagram that I showed earlier. So over here on the left, this side goes to your workstation. The middle has a little bit of firmware to shuffle packets around. And on the right, we have a USB chip that goes to the target machine. This can also act as a USB host, which is useful for some data recovery tricks. Now, USB, even though it's just a network, it has different terminology from what you're used to in TCP networking. Instead of ports, you have endpoints. And the endpoints don't have a particular number because there's a descriptor that tells the host which endpoint is used for which, except for the setup endpoint, which is always endpoint 0. Most of these are unidirectional, but sometimes they're bidirectional. And the only important thing you need to remember is that you have class types which are standardized, such as mass storage or HID, and you have vendor types which are not, such as FTDI or Wi-Fi card drivers. Now, you know how Windows let's take Linux for example. You know how this Linux laptop supports every USB device ever manufactured except for the wireless card in this laptop? Those are all open ports speaking complicated protocols that the device can attack. And in the same way that the device can attack it, it can also fingerprint the host to figure out what it's doing. It's easy to recognize the difference between the Linux dialect and the Windows dialect of USB. We also make implicit assumptions about how these pieces work. We assume that blocks are read in the same way that they're written. We assume that the access order does not change the meaning. So when you use DD to copy a disk drive, you're reading it from the beginning to the end. You assume that will give you the same data as if you read each file individually. But that's not necessarily true. And in general, you're just assuming that it behaves like a block device, and like any other block device. You assume that a thumb drive is the same as a hard disk, is the same as a solid-state disk, because this assumption is close enough when the disk is behaving properly. When disks violate this assumption, they create all sorts of hell for IT departments. There have been trouble with disks misinterpreting ext4 or NTFS file systems and accidentally deleting important files. So Colin Mulliner decided to violate these assumptions with the time of check to time of use attack against a Samsung television. The idea was that the television had a rule, it had a script, that would check plugins to make sure that they weren't malicious. The TV internally supports plugins that are either .swf or .so. So when the TV first came out, people just recompiled telnet daemon to be a .so file. They loaded it in as a plugin, and the TV would happily give them a remote root shell. So the TV vendor rewrote the rules. The new rule says that you can run a .so plugin, but you may not install one. Now, when you install a plugin, it checks the rule. It makes sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. It says, if the plugin is a .swf, then install the plugin. What Colin realized was that these didn't have to be the same plugins. They had to exist at the same location on the disk, but if you could trick the host into reading the file twice, rather than rereading it from cache, then you could make it so that the second read had a malicious plugin, but the first read had a safe plugin. And by doing it that way, the TV would think that the plugin was safe to install and would install it. So that's what he did. And in order to flush the cache, he made 300 megabytes of white space within the XML file that described the plugin. This happily flushed the cache. He had a little trigger so that when the end of that file was read, it would switch to the second copy. And so when he said to install it, the TV would think that it was valid, and then it would install it. And that allowed him to jailbreak the TV. So remember, these cache attacks allow us to switch between two statements. If the plugin is an SWF, well, this time we provide the file that is. Then install the plugin. Well, this time we give it a .so, and that allows the TV to be exploited. Because we violate its implicit assumptions about things staying the same beneath the hood. Now, he implemented this on a Nokia N900, and the attack cannot work without an active disk to swap the sectors. You have to reprogram something. So the natural conclusion is that you want to build your own disk. So that's what I did. I implemented the USB mass storage class, and then I implemented SCSI on top of that. Now, mass storage is just a wrapper for SCSI. So all that mass storage is doing is shuffling SCSI commands back and forth to the device. Now, these wrapped instructions have a couple of status fields, but there's no way in USB mass storage to directly read or write a sector. That's all done in SCSI, which is routed over USB, which means that you can do all sorts of crazy SCSI stuff that the USB mass storage protocol was never intended to handle. For example, it used to be popular to have SCSI scanners, and these are still supported by Linux. You can connect a SCSI scanner through a thumb drive. You can also connect a thumb drive to the driver for a USB scanner. There are all sorts of dead code regions that you can reach. And the standard documents for the USB end only describe the wrappers, so there's a strong temptation on the operating system author's standpoint to just sort of tie the two into each other. So in many operating systems, you wind up speaking the original low-level SCSI dialect to the host, which means that you can do all sorts of fancy SCSI features that have been forgotten about. The host sends a command block wrapper. The device will reply with a command status wrapper. And the host always speaks first. In almost all USB protocols, you have a speak when spoken to protocol. So USB devices are required to behave like 19th century children. Even so much that the host will hit them with a stick if they misbehave. The host will very frequently reboot a misbehaving device in order to get it back to an acceptable state. And the successor failure code comes after the data is sent. And the data is sent in the middle in either direction, which makes it a bit awkward to read from the outside until you realize that there's no fragmentation across directions. So just like you can read an HTTP request without anything telling you which line went in which direction, you can do the same thing for USB. And it's the SCSI documentations that describe everything interesting about the transaction. These are the SCSI commands that you might use. Even though you don't think that you need all of these, this is the minimum set that needs to be included for the disk to function. Because in addition to being able to read and write a sector, the disk also needs to be able to tell the host what its block size is. It needs to be able to tell the host what its serial number is, what its capacity is, what its manufacturer name is, which dialect of SCSI it speaks, how quickly it can speak. These are sent over the inquiry command and the read format capacities. You also need to understand that this standard was written in the late 70s or the early 80s. So do you remember when a floppy disk could be formatted in either low density mode or high density mode? Modern Linux still supports that for hard disks. You can actually declare that a hard disk can be either 1 megabyte or 1 terabyte, depending upon how it's formatted. And the host will handle that. So you have different variants as well. So there's one command to read with a 6-bit wide address. There's another to read with a 10-bit wide address. And if these seem particularly small, it's because the address is a logical block address. So you're unable to read from unaligned locations. There's no way to express that you want to read the 11th byte. You have to read the entire first sector, which is either 512 or 2048 bytes. There are also other dialect differences, like ATA pass-through. As soon as you plug a USB mass storage device into a Linux laptop, it'll say, hey, I really don't like this newfangled SCSI crap. Would you rather speak ATA? And the device is then given the choice to radically change dialects, which again opens up new areas of code that the device can attack on the host. There are commands for dealing with this, such as SG3 utils. In the same way that you might want to send a raw network packet, it's very common that you would want to send a raw SCSI packet. When you use DD on the command line, certain parameters get ignored. For example, the block size parameter in DD is just used for math and for performance between the process and the operating system. It's completely ignored by the time it gets to the SCSI device. So if you actually want to read in small chunks, you have to use SG3's version of DD, which does allow you to control how much you read at a time. So if you have a very old SCSI disk that can't send more than 2 blocks at a time, using SG3 DD, if you set block size to 2, then it will read in those chunks. And you can also use the other commands to verify that you've implemented individual responses correctly. So sginc for inquiry will run just the inquiry command and then show you the formatted response so that you know that your implementation is correct. So how does it feel like to be a disk? Well, you have SCSI commands arriving over the bus, and you have minimal USB wrappers around them. And the host dialect is very distinct. Linux's version of USB is different from BSD's, which is different from OS X, which is different from Windows. And the same dialect differences occur at the SCSI level. So you can figure out what type of a host you're speaking to. You can also figure out the host's intent. You can figure out what sort of file system driver is being used by what data structure the host follows. Is it reading sequentially from the beginning to the end, or is it dancing along the directories and reading just the files? And this allows you to figure out whether or not you should trust your host. There are different tricks you can do, and they have different uses to them. It's very useful to prevent undelete from working. If I were to give you my thumb drive, that doesn't immediately seem as stupid as Mike giving me a root shell on his laptop. But I might have had some confidential documents on that thumb drive. I know a few people who commonly, when they're given thumb drives, like passed around at conferences or trainings, will just take a disk image of it and look through it later. And they find all sorts of stuff. You can trap on imaging so that you can recognize when the host is reading your disk in its entirety. And then you can either destroy yourself or give fake data. And because you can have file systems that are mostly empty, you can get very good compression while hiding non-existent file systems. So unlike TrueCrypt, which has to waste space and nest things and have all sorts of fancy software tricks, if you control the actual disk, you can just make that partition inaccessible in the same way that a directory of a web server might be inaccessible until the proper credentials are provided. You can also unlock after a timestamp is received. Forensics labs have lots of rules to them. One of these rules is that the evidence can't be damaged. This is done for reasons in criminal forensics when they need to get a clean prosecution. Well, it depends upon the country, but some countries want a clean prosecution. And if you want a clean prosecution, then you've got to make sure that you can show the jury that nothing bad has happened to the data. The way that they do this is through a set of standards that say that, for example, the disk can never be written to. So they use write blockers, or they use custom disk copiers that can only read from the disk and cannot send the write command. But that means that they never write a timestamp. Windows has a little-known feature to it, which is that when you open up a volume, it writes a timestamp so that it remembers the last time it used that volume. Well, if the timestamp isn't being written, then you know that you're not speaking to a legitimate Windows host. And so from these behaviors, you can figure out what the host intends. You can also check for a write blocker and then trap against that, because a write blocker will block any SCSI command that it does not understand. Do you remember how I said that Linux would ask to switch from SCSI to ATA? Well, write blockers don't understand ATA, so they block that command. So if you're speaking to a Linux host and it does not ask to switch dialects, you know that that's suspicious. You know that the host might be trying to make a copy of you. And so by recognizing this, the disk can reply in the appropriate way. To take a concrete example, there's this feature called undelete, which is undelete.exe has been in DOS since what, like DOS 4, maybe even DOS 3. In DOS, you have an 8.3 file name. So you have an 8-letter file name and a 3-letter type. So let's say we've got a file called abcdefghijk. In order to delete it, all that happens is that the A gets changed to 0xE5. And if there's a long file name, it's even worse because the long file name is left intact. But we'll stick to the DOS version here. So you begin with these bytes, and then you convert to these other bytes. This is one powerful laptop, Mike. It's coming, I know it. OK. So this E5, instead of the A, is the only thing that changes in the disk. The contents of the file are left in place until they're accidentally overwritten. The rest of the file name exists. So you might not be able to know exactly what the first letter of this file name was, but you can know everything else. And thumb drives are loaned out all the time. And older files can be undeleted. You know, how many privately shared files have you in the room received on a thumb drive that you accidentally used later? And for those of you saying, oh, I'm smart, I don't do that, I follow best practices all the time, how many of you have given files that are confidential to a colleague on a thumb drive? You know, these things are still sitting around, and as you share the thumb drive with other people, it goes further. It would be really useful to have a thumb drive that just prevented this much from working. They would just delete a file as it's no longer needed. And there are SSDs that do this for performance reasons, but no one's ever done it for security reasons. There are tools that do this called Magic Rescue, ext undelete. Undelete.exe from DOS 5 still works on a modern VFAT partition. You can still recover files from a modern thumb drive with DOS. And the disk can fix this because it can overwrite these blocks when the file name is changed. It can recognize the intent of the host in changing that block. Because there's no reason why the host needs to be the only thing that understands the file system. The disk can also interpret its own file system. And this shouldn't break any file system drivers because it's only a deleted object that you're changing. It's actually the case on higher-end SSDs that in order to have more free blocks to be overwritten, they will automatically zero them out for performance reasons. Because in a flash disk, it takes a lot more time to erase a region than to write onto an erased region, which is why they do that. And this is less tricky to implement than the time of check to time of use attacks, because you don't need to know the exact behavior of the host. You just need to know enough of the file system, enough of the standard and documented behaviors, as opposed to the device-specific and undocumented behaviors. You can also trap on imaging, because in a criminal forensics lab, the very first step is imaging. You know, if any of you in the room do forensics and you get a disk and you're told to look at the disk, you know, the responsible thing to do is before you do anything else, and for the love of God, before you plug it into your regular laptop, you make a copy of it. And you sign off on that copy and you record that that copy occurred at that point in time. But the disk can recognize that you're doing this, and it can destroy itself as you're doing it. It can nuke its own contents. You can also do it by block order. Right? So in addition to seeing like what sort of host software you're running, the disk can check to see if you're reading in order. All disk imaging software seems to read from the beginning to the end, except for one piece of Russian software, which, get this, can read from the end back to the beginning. Nothing reads from random positions. Nothing follows the disk file system structure. So you can recognize that these things are happening. And if it's linear with large block requests across many files, then you can just start writing instead of reading on each file. You have plenty of time to do this because you're stepping through the blocks one by one. Can you read the numbers? OK. Is this a legitimate read, or is this a malicious read? OK. How do you know? Yeah. So this isn't actually random. It's that each one of these blocks is a DOS file system data structure, and they're being crawled. Because when you're at the DOS prompt and you type dir, DOS doesn't immediately hit the disk. It has a cached copy of the file system. And as the cache is populated, you see the reads occur. You can also sort of pause the emulator. And all of this so far will run on your conference badge. If you pause it and then you run a command on the host, in this case, I have a Linux host. So I run cat/mnt/setup.bat. And you can see that it's fetching 28 blocks starting at logical block address 280. Can anyone guess where this file is physically located on the disk? Now, if we were to use DD to read it, you can see that the pattern is very different. So what shows that this is a malicious read, a disk imaging? So it's sequential. You'll also see that the number of blocks being read at once keeps jumping upward. So it's reading across individual directories and individual files. In a legitimate file system, there's no reason for the host to read much further beyond the end of a file. There's definitely no reason for a host to read 240 blocks at a time when the largest file is smaller than that. So you can trap on imaging by looking for sequential access beginning at block 0, block requests in order, or chunks of blocks that contain multiple files, and then you can reply in kind. You can also trap on a timestamp. So Windows writes a timestamp when mounting a volume. That shows you that there is no write blocker between the Windows host and the disk device. Now, you can fingerprint the host in many different ways. You can fingerprint because Windows writes timestamps. You can fingerprint because it reads the master boot record many times. People think that the block device has a cache. But in a modern operating system, it's not the block device that caches, it's the file system. So the Windows developers read the master boot record once to know how many partitions there are. It does not see an extended partition table, so there are 4 partitions. So it reads to learn the beginning of 1, the end of 1, the beginning of 2, the end of 2, the beginning of 3, the end of 3, the beginning of 4, the end of 4. That is 9 different accesses to the master boot record just to mount the disk. This is unnecessary, but it's a bug that Microsoft has no reason to fix. And it's those sorts of innocent bugs that allow us to fingerprint the host and identify this as being a Windows machine. Mac OS X uses the set feature command in USB, which no other operating system uses during enumeration. FreeBSD sends a very old dialect of SCSI, and it explicitly tells the disk how to do caching. So you can recognize FreeBSD that way. OpenBSD does not pause when there's a USB error or a disk read error. So OpenBSD's USB stack is a lot faster than its competitors, but it's easy to fingerprint. And Linux distributions are distinguished by their auto mounters. So if you want to boot an operating system off of an antiforensics disk, you can have it sort of know the secret knock that allows the disk to continue mounting with the hidden partitions. This way, only by running the software on the host can you prove to the disk that you're trustworthy. Write blockers are common in small forensics labs, particularly if you don't need things to be useful in court, but you do need someone to recover disks for you. They act as a SCSI packet filter dropping untrusted packets. Well, you can extract its rule set and either fingerprint on that or find exploitable extensions. ATA pass-throughs, and other fancy commands or drops. So those immediately tell you what the host is doing. But the phased answer has one big problem, two big problems. This is a tortoise on a leash. The phased answer is slow, and it has to be tethered to a host computer. This is fine for development. For development, I want to be able to sit at my laptop, write some ugly Python code, and when it crashes, I want a full debugger on my laptop to tell me what's going on. For deployment, I want it to run in an iPod. So what I did was I did what anyone does, and I looked to Russian demotivator forums for advice. This has a caption. It says, "So you think this is an iPod?" And the author says, "My parents do too." You can reprogram an iPod in the same way that this kid was using it to hide his cigarettes. You can reprogram the iPod with the Rockbox firmware, which is an open source application that allows you to play music on your iPod without running any of Apple's code. So we can patch this for Antiforensics. This is also nice because it allows it to be lightweight and portable without it being suspicious. Anyone who wants to play games on their iPod, now that Apple has destroyed the iPod Game Store, needs to use Rockbox, and it's a rather common extension. So if you patch that, it doesn't outwardly look suspicious. So Rockbox targets not only the iPod, but also the SanDisk units. Apparently, Packard Bell is still around, and they make an MP3 player. And it has a very portable USB device stack. So it has a single implementation of USB mass storage that every one of its target platforms implements. The file in question is usbstorage.c, which implements USB mass storage in SCSI. And we can hook this in, we can hook into the two function handlers, one for SCSI read 10 and one for SCSI write 10. The reads, for performance reasons, actually occur in two different locations to allow for pre-buffering, and we need to tap both of them. But the amount of code is rather simple. This checks to see if the iPod firmware is being read, because no legitimate host will ever read the firmware, and the firmware comes before the first legitimate partition, so it is read before anything dangerous that needs to be kept private is found later on. So all we do is blacklist a region and check to see if anything in that region is being read. If so, tamper detect equals true. Now, if the tampering has been detected, this code overwrites the sector with Rick Astley lyrics and then writes it to the disk. Now here, I'm in /mnt/USB. I have all of my files. I have a little bit of music. And I can do all sorts of fun stuff with that. But for the moment, let's just unmount that. So I'm unmounting MNT USB, and then I'm rsyncing Mike's SSH private key to my host in Philadelphia. So let's use DD to read the disk. So in this case, the device is /dev/SDC. I had SDC2 mounted, and SDC1 is the firmware that the host is not allowed to read. So I'm just going to read this. Oh, Mike, do you not have hex dump? OK, so at this point, it's reading the early pieces of the disk that it is allowed to read. And it's dumping it out, and it's crawling through the disk. And as it moves forward, it's going to hit regions that it's not allowed to read. So I've decided not to release firmware images of this for two reasons. First, I'm only interested in studying the problem itself. I'm not interested in being a software maintainer. Because there are three types of open source software. There's free as in speech, free as in beer, and unfortunately for the maintainers, free as in a puppy. So instead what I have is this journal, the International Journal of Proof of Concept or Get the Fuck Out, in which you'll find a nifty little article on how to build devices like this by patching the Rockbox code. And it contains all of the patches you need for minimal antiforensics. And at this point, I think we're going to move on to the closing ceremony. So I'd like to thank you kindly for your time and attention. Okay, so I have time for a couple of questions, or we could do an auction. How much for Mike's private key? $1,000. Going once? Mike, you're not bidding. Okay, yeah, but questions? Yep.
Okay. So I know that there's the way that you notice that the disk is being imaged is just by the fact that it's being read in a serial way. But because you're now actually talking about it, and so I'm guessing that there's a chance that the companies that actually make the disk imaging software might change that to be relatively random. Wouldn't you feel it would be more appropriate to do like a disk knocking thing, like read this sector and that sector, and then you'll have a solution?
Yeah, so the reason I'm not doing that is because I don't want host software to be a part of it, or to be a necessary part of it. I have been working on a patch to FreeBSD that will boot from my disk, and it has a secret partition that's only available by exposing itself. A bigger issue, though, is that you can bypass the iPod's firmware just by overwriting it. So what you really want is to have a bare disk, because patching the iPod is cool, but what you really want to do is to patch the hard disk inside of the iPod. Western Digital and Seagate together have 90% of the hard disk market. So at ACSEC in December, along with a long list of colleagues, this was a big project. Basically, we reverse engineered a Seagate hard disk, and then we wrote a remotely accessible backdoor that you can connect to through the internet by having the host write a file and then read it back to you, such as through HTML5 local storage or through updating the profile in a stupid Web 2.0 new media website. Now that's Seagate. So for Western Digital, there's this guy in Holland, Sprite TM, and at Ohm about a month ago, he published reverse engineering documentation for Western Digital documents. On Western Digital, JTAG is open. So not only is development easier, but it turns out you can even boot the Linux kernel on it, and that he managed to get the Linux kernel booting on it. So we're approaching the end of this period in which a disk is a static object that you can trust to save things for you and then to provide them back. It might soon become the case that you need to encrypt the contents of your disk in the same way and for the same reason that you have to encrypt your local wireless network, because you can't trust the disk with the contents. And here's a list of the papers that you should read. So, thank you kindly.
Hi, everybody. Hey, everyone. Adrian's going to come in a minute, but I thought I'd tell you a secret, right? So we've got some really cool prizes, and it's a secret, don't tell Adrian, but for the past 3 years, I've been deliberately trying to get him on watch lists.
Move. Awesome. Right. I've got a radio mic somewhere. Is this working? Yeah, that's cool. So wasn't that fun? Yes. It's not quite over yet because I couldn't have done that last year because it was a week after a rather big collision. And I've got to be really thankful to two people, my physiopath Michael Krebin, who's really rebuilt me, and also Career Bicycles, who actually got this bike for me to reduce the stress that's put on my shoulder. It's allowed me to get back training quite quickly. Something happened, and I'm kind of diverging a bit from InfoSec. I've actually been asked to join their board. So if any of you want a nice discount on a carbon road frame, I'll be in the position to offer this to you in the future. So I don't know, maybe we diverge as we get older. Is it a midlife crisis? I don't know, but I love bikes and I love riding. So anyway, now we have something extra happening, and some of you have already seen them. We've got rather a lot of kava left, and some of you are being given it. So we've got all the great people from In the Spirit. They're walking around giving the glasses out, so I do hope you like this. And while they're doing that, we're going to get on with the show, because I know some of you want to get to the pub, some of you want to get home, and more of you want the prizes. So
Can we keep the bar open a little longer?
I don't know. They're closing it down, so talk with one of them. Okay, so the first thing, a con is nothing without its speakers. The speakers are the reason you will come. It's the reason, really, that any con exists. And we've got some quite awesome quotes. So, I must thank our speakers a lot. We've had some really good feedback. We've been called the best speaker operations team in any conference in the world, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. We've really worked hard on that aspect of the conference to make sure it works. And I'd like to thank all of the 2013 speakers for their contribution, their hard work, their research efforts, and we've got that many that I've got a second slide of them. Right, so the next part of the puzzle is you've got your speakers, you've then got a place like London, and you've got venues that charge you literally an arm and a leg to run an event in them. You're screwed unless you've got sponsors. And if you do know possible future sponsors for an event of ours, please tell us. It would be nice. Please hook us up. We'd be very, very grateful. So this year's sponsors, let's really thank NCC for their great stand where they had some really funky games. And they made a huge contribution to us. And they actually sponsored last year. They came back and decided they wanted the top spot. So thank you. Consistent supporter, and really, MWR supported us from the word go. They've been a sponsor every year. And I think some of you will remember the party last night. And for once, the bar didn't run out of booze. Well, I haven't run out of lime juice and ice and soda and stuff, but hey.
Do you think that might have been something to do with me going to bed at 10:30?
Well, if you will wait to finish your slides. Okay, so this year we had silver sponsors as well. And it's the first time BT have, I think, sponsored any of our events. So thanks very much for BT for coming along. And Microsoft came and sponsored us for the second time, I think. It was year one and this year. So it's great thanks to them for that. It might have seemed a little empty upstairs, but we actually wanted some more space there so that you could feel that you weren't really compressed and tight during all of the socializing and networking bits and pieces. And they both chose not to have stands. And I would like to think it's in our interest to have more space, but that's all good. So we have also the bronze sponsors, CheckSec, Norman Shark, Mandalorian, Alienate and SensePost. And Alienate's mine, but I hope it all worked out. And really, Yeah, the bronze is an important level for us, and we try and price it at a level where companies that want to enter the UK market could actually have a nice representation at the event. And they all had stands, and I hope you enjoyed talking to them. I think the other part of the event, and this is one of our USPs, Gin O'Clock and the Blackberry Lounge. We thank them again for I think that's their third year as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They sponsored us for the first year and sort of only slightly, and then the second year we managed to convince them that they should go and spend a load of money on gin getting people drunk. And, and this year they're actually giving us a BlackBerry Z10 to give away. Hello, it's awesome.
And we had a new level of sponsorship this year for companies that wished to help us, and they wanted to get people to the con. They didn't want a table. Event supporters, and Raytheon and SetQuest were the... Raytheon, I think, they sponsored last year. I think they've got too many projects on this year. They're quite busy. And SetQuest I saw walking around, so thanks, guys. And also Crest. And we because I think the importance of Crest to the community in terms of certification, we felt that they were worthy of a table, so we hope you enjoyed talking to them. As ever, the venue crew are essential to the event, and Shirley, sort of pre-operations, was great this year. Slawak was just fantastic during setup. He was still around at 11 o'clock on Wednesday night, sorting out everything that needed doing, and without him, I think Thursday morning would have been rather more fraught, to say the least. All the operations team were great as well. They were keeping things running in the background for you. It is a little bit warmer up on stage today. I'm not going to be chattering my teeth when I get off, so I guess that worked. And there's Andrew Woods. He's the sales director for the venue, and he fought the corporate machine for us. So thanks to them all. Now, of course, you can't do a conference without crew. So I'd like all the crew to come up on stage. Don't trip over the Nerf toy, but come up and show yourselves, because you've all worked incredibly hard. You've been absolutely brilliant this year, I think. We've had... And Travis, two lines. Okay. And Travis, there's one thing we really, really need the crew to do. Could you come and teach them how to jig?
No jigging on stage. This thing might collapse.
Oh, give it a try. Go on.
It's the end of the conference. If it collapses, it collapses.
Just stand on that bit.
People's native dance. I'm from Southern Appalachia. Don't say Appalachia, that's racist. And so the way that you dance, as we'll demonstrate, is you jump up and down like you're drunk. It helps to really be drunk. Could someone pass me my beer? Thank you kindly. And as you're jumping up and down, you just kick your feet, and people say, but they'll think I'm an idiot. And yes, that's the purpose of the dance. So join with me now in my people's native culture. If we try again, I bet we could break it.
Thanks, Travis. We'll have you back for the prizes. Right. Okay, if you guys want to start doing breakdown and come back down later, that would be awesome. Thank you very much indeed. To give you an idea, we started work on this con a week after last year's con, and it really kicked in November last year, and I think the amount of work put in, especially by Scap and Natalie was incredible to pull this all together. So, great thanks to them. It just would not have happened without them. So, the 2013 bar. I don't know, was it a good choice to go with a quality external bar? Would you like them back next year?
Drink more then. I mean, responsibly. Drink more, responsibly, more.
Yeah, because all I can tell you on the Guinness side, it was an epic fail. You didn't even do one barrel, so I don't know whether we're going to do draft Guinness next year. I want hundreds of angry emails saying you will drink Guinness next year, and in that case, we might have one barrel.
How much Guinness do we have left now?
About 40 pints.
All right, can Krista and CMN go up to the bar now?
Anyway, right, now on to pricey things, because we like pricey things. Pricey things are, who was up first? Ooh, it's NCC. So NCC had a really funky game on their stand. And so here's the shocker. 699 games over 2 days. Why couldn't you have done one more? So anyway, the top 4, I think, top 5 get prizes. Excellent. And someone from NCC is going to bring me a bag of goodies, I think, at this point. Awesome. Do you want to jump up here and actually hand them out or anything? Excellent. Okie dokie. So could we have the winner, please? Towels.
So he's won the, so we came and did this game, and we thought we'd have a cool first prize, which was a 3D printer. We have it here. We're going to be shipping it to Towels over the next week. So just a handshake for Towels. And congratulations, mate.
Awesome. Anything? You know what you're giving out. Okay. 2 towels?
No,
No, he's done. You've got the big prize.
3D printer.
Go on, big prize. Don't be greedy. Right.
The next 4 guys got something a little bit less, but they've all got a Raspberry Pi, a card, and a case. So consolation prize for the guys who couldn't quite beat Towels, though.
So, Camby, Thomas, Seb J, and Matt, can you come up and get your toys? Woohoo! There you go.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much indeed. I think there's a message there. Games on stands mean prizes. Games on stand means people visit your stand. Yeah, games next year, guys. Games. Okay, so the other thing we had running was the CTF, and I've got some really tiny notes here to read. So, 25 teams pre-registered, 11 teams confirmed and actually started. That's better than last year. A couple of the teams came late to the party, and that was definitely too late for the win. Men of low moral fibre took a very early lead, quickly got to grips with the applications and started to attack. They really racked up the offensive points early. People in second place, they started slowly as they didn't automate flag collection. Tut, tut, tut. There was then, sadly, some abusive behaviour. Men of low moral fibre lived up to their name and started to delete flags.
Those bitches need section
1. That's a rule violation. Penalised, and other teams were given a compensatory boost as a result of the lost database that was dropped during the attacks. Just says it already. Whoops. So I think you can see that there. Yeah, oh well, never mind. Anyway, so that's kind of fun. There were some targeted attacks then against the leaders. So their defensive points started being eaten away as the final day progressed. It It seems they'd missed a vowel on their box. Whoops. And someone decided to organize a DDoS from one of the other team's VMs that they'd compromised. I have no idea how the CTF team worked that one out. Stewards investigated, however, ruled and docked points from the culprits. So, you know, DDoS does not pay. Come on, LSEC, learn that one. So, in 7th to 11th place, you have all the teams here. Turn up earlier next year, guys, and I don't know whether we might run a workshop as the very first workshop of the day, how to play CTFs. Actually, that would be quite good. Should we do it? Yes. Yeah, okay, right, wicked. In 2nd and 3rd place, we had Fisher-Price and So you see, Fisher-Price actually did quite well, 100% on defense eventually. They were not some offensive points, but as you see, there are some advisory points there. And you'll see, lost all their advisory point, had no advisory points. Rule compliance is kind of amusing. And total points, I'm afraid, that's not bad, 69-ish%. But I'm afraid men of low moral fibre held their nerve throughout the 2 days, and they are winners of the MWR Labs 44Con CTF 2013. So Tim, are you there? Come up and get your T-shirt with your teammate. We only made one. We'll make another one for your teammate, but and please note that we have a banner underneath of all the previous winners, and last year's winner was Tim. Now, I'm sorry, this just isn't good enough. Are you guys going to let him win it 3 years in a row? Yeah. Pathetic. Anyway, there you go. Well done. Take care of yourself. And that's, we'll see you next year. Oh, by the way, you know that workshop we mentioned? You're doing it. That's good. Right. Now the fun bit. Prizes. So, you've got raffle tickets. Raffle tickets. Ah, there we go. There we go. Should we do the BlackBerry one first? Yeah. Okay.
Let's get Travis to do that one when it comes to
Travis, would you like to come and help us do all this stuff?
I'll name the stuff. When we get to the normal stuff, I'll name it and announce it.
Yep, okay. So for those of you that gave your business card in this wonderful thing during the gin o'clock, you stand a chance of winning this Z10. And we actually have one. It's quite heavy. So there we go.
Okay. So when BlackBerry told me that they couldn't hook me up with the Z10 because they were out. All right. And the winner is Travis Goodspeed from Maciej Judah.
Magic Duda.
There we go.
Excellent. And if you have a spare hand, you want to give that to the guys?
So when you guys lost my SIM card billing information, like, okay, you can make it right, you know.
Excellent. Okay. Right. So you know those raffle ticket things you've got? Be a good time to find them. Oh no, you can stay for a bit longer. We got lots of stuff here.
I already lost one raffle. Trying to rub it in?
So,
All right. So not that I've been trying to get Adrian onto a watch list for the past 3 years, but prize number 1, a history of chemical and biological weapons.
And the winner is Travis Goodspeed. 312.
Anyone? Bueller? Al-Zawahiri?
You could lie and pretend you have it. Oh, now the hands come up.
No? Okay, in that case, last call. Okay, draw again.
Travis Goodspeed. Number 497.
Boy. No? Okay.
That one guy's really trying with the fake hand raising. I say we just give it to Travis Goodspeed. 405. Yep.
Yay!
We have a winner.
Right.
Now, just so you know, you do have to declare this at Heathrow Airport. just walk up to the desk and say, I have something to declare. Oh, God, he actually did win it.
So, completely and totally innocuous prize number 2. How to Build a Nuclear Bomb and Other Weapons of Mass Destruction by Frank Barnaby.
209. Hey, like 6 of you won. Thomas Lim, come on up.
Wow.
There you go.
Hey, it's got pictures.
Okay, so prize number 3, The Batman Handbook, the Ultimate Training Manual.
No. 555.
No worries.
Yeah. No one even pretended that time. You're getting lazy.
Hang on. Hold that, Trevor. Oh, no. Oops. You good?
I'm waiting for him to show the next prize.
Oh, well, we can do this. A Guide to Surviving the Zombie Apocalypse in Great Britain. Z-Day UK.
I've seen 28 Days Later. Britain does not do well. 385.
People going home, I don't know.
186. I got 2 of the digits right. You can pay me later.
Excellent. There you go. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. We didn't do the Batman Handbook, did we? Okay, let's do that one again.
9.
Are you,
Or is it 6?
are you listening to music?
Oh yeah, sorry.
He had 6, but it's close enough.
Okay, so the next innocuous prize, The Chemistry of Explosives, 3rd edition.
Again, don't forget to declare these gifts with customs, you know. 303.
The new
303, it's a number. 303. I know you're good at the quiz games, but, you know, it's okay. You know, not everybody's good at the raffle.
Ooh. Details of new explosives, such as, wow.
Ooh, FOX 12. This could be fun. 226. Does it have PETN? I hear they like that.
Go on. Yeah, that's a win.
There you go.
I so love it if someone from the government who works in cryptography gets this. Cryptography engineering, design principles and practical applications.
Six.
Yes?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Cool.
Right, start walking quicker. We've got lots of prizes. Get out your ticket.
All right, show the next prize.
All right, Zombie jerky. Teriyaki, it's beef jerky. Delicious.
It's a bit off.
Again,
little
declare any
green.
zombie flesh products with the customs, number 412. $281. Oh,
Hurry up, come on.
yeah. I should disqualify you, but we're in a rush.
Marvelous, thank you.
Ah, it'll be good for the soul.
Freeze-dried, ready-to-eat space food. Astronaut Neapolitan ice cream.
313. Don't quit the space program when you realize what this tastes like, Mike.
This is the one I wanted.
Hubsan X4 drone.
I want one of these.
Have you submitted the feedback form?
261.
Ooh, excellent. I mean, it runs on 2.4, so just worry about, man in the middle. Or...
A pair of matching Tamagotchis. I wonder what you can do with that.
Yeah, we must say, this is the last board that made it, and it's a full kit to do your own Tamagotchi, donated by the speaker, so...
431.
Oh, quick, come on. It's a great prize.
And if you don't think a remote code execution exploit for a masked programmed children's toy is not cool, you have no fucking soul. Just get out. Don't come back next year.
All right, this one has Graham Sutherland written all over it. The Handbook of Model Rocketry, 7th edition.
Ooh.
231.
Yep.
Where I come from, we have a local movie that was shot with kids from the area called Orange Sky. And the kids historically did get arrested for a forest fire that didn't start out of Red Scare propaganda during the Cold War. All they wanted to do was launch some rockets. And they were later employed by NASA, and one poor bastard had to live on ice cream, freeze-dried ice cream for a month. Dark times, dark times.
So, hands up if you've ever listened to radio outside of the normal FM bands. Hands up if you would like to listen to radio outside of the normal FM bands. All right, we've got a bunch of SDRs.
If you kept your hand down, get the fuck out. Don't come back next year. 536.
Yep. And another one.
All right, next one.
Thank you. Whoops.
246. Nope. Oh, there we go. You're not good with the numbers, are you? So everybody here knows their numbers. Everybody there sucks at it, except for him.
Be generous with your
Two.
friends.
251. 251.
Hey. Oh,
All right, and once more with Feeling Travis.
What are you doing?
Go. 95.
Last one.
Woo! Jerry, if you could look at my number and remind me what it is so I can pretend I won. Thanks.
Okay. Some sort of Microsoft coin with a skull on it. I promise to pay the bearer one open sourcing of Microsoft Windows.
So these are 2011 vintage. This is the first year that they started doing challenge coins. So have fun.
236. Unfortunately, the bearer does not get 81 column support in Windows 8.1. Maybe next time.
This one reads, I entitle the bearer to a convoluted shutdown method for Windows 8.
I remember when we thought it was painful to click on the start menu, but now it's even worse. 110.
This one says, I like Linux. When they finish it, I'll be sure to use it.
523.
Nope.
569.
Oh, 523.
All right, well,
Excellent.
and 569.
There we go. Enjoy.
Uh,
Oh no, if we run out of those.
440.
Right, now this
Okay.
is...
This is an Arduino development kit. I think I was kind of drunk when I suggested these, you might think, but
132.
We can slow down a bit now. Nice prize. We think all the bits are in there.
this is an Arduino GSM shield.
Oh, that's handy.
136. Nope. 136. Cool.
Next.
241. Yep.
Hey. This one we could probably throw.
All right, another Hubsan X4 quadricopter.
There you go. Thank you. Ooh, shiny. I want one.
If the winner of the GSM modem would like a quadcopter, just yell your number back to me from some other tickets so I can cheat for you. 462. Yep.
Woohoo. There you go. Welcome.
God, if I actually win something important, all these cheating jokes are going to come back to bite me.
More astronaut ice cream.
288.
Neapolitan again.
It's a little known fact that astronaut ice cream has set back the American space program more than blowing up 2 space shuttles. 339. Russians are unaffected by astronaut ice cream because, well, you've had Russian food. Except for caviar. Caviar is nice. 162. Cool. Come on up. Or is that just a random yet? Okay, cool.
Another...
Zombie jerky.
I kind of wonder how hard it was to get caviar in the Soviet Union, right? Like,
Thank you.
It was really easy if you were in the dacha.
yeah,
If
but
you were
like,
outside of a dacha, it was not so easy.
553.
Zombie jerky again. Excellent.
It smells a little funny, but don't let that put you off. It's
Oh
got a
God,
real
it's
bite to it.
green. Is this shit vegetarian?
No.
Okay, it's
Really
not that
not.
bad. You know? I mean, make me eat zombie flesh. You know, shame on you, but make me eat Soylent Green and, you know.
All right, so
Last two things.
anyone here have a Wi-Fi pineapple? Anybody here want a Wi-Fi pineapple?
We should go.
All right, so the Wi-Fi pineapple is based on the Alpha AP121U, which is in turn based on a really interesting single board computer that I've done a lot of really horrible stuff with. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if other people did horrible stuff other than just flashing the Wi-Fi pineapple firmware, which will work fine? So this is the Hornet UB Atheros 802.11n board that will function as a Wi-Fi pineapple. But you can also just stick anything you want and do some really horrible things.
507.
With the GSM shield.
Yeah, that's how I was socially engineered out of my quadcopter. 417.
People watching this on DVD who went home are going to be so sorry.
181.
And it's...
Okay, and the final entry in the list of reasons that Adrian would look really good in an orange jumpsuit in Cuba is The Preparatory Manual of Explosives, 3rd edition, a comprehensive laboratory manual.
I would like to dedicate this to the fine chap at London Heathrow who helped me smuggle a bottle of duty-free whiskey past the liquid ban. 51.
Splendid prize. Splendid prize. Right. Well, I think that's it, Travis. Thank you very much indeed for your assistance.
What?
giving out
No,
all these
no, no.
toys.
74 wins all the remaining prizes.
The table is bare.
Oh, I'll take the
It's a
table.
sign.
I've got a frisbee.
Right. Some of those were a bit heavy, so we really were looking for ways not to cripple people by throwing them this year. So I think the raffle tickets work okay. We'll see what we can do to try and entice people to stay towards the end next time. Anyway, right, so the mandatory thing, if this works. Right, here we go. Yeah, you can get early bird tickets now. And you might want to wait till the end of the pack, because I might tell you a date. Ooh. Now, there's just one more thing.
So it's not about the uranium-235 I had shipped to your place?
The speaking space is fine. It's the non-speaking space that's the problem here. We put another 50 people in here, and you are going to be like this. The workshops aren't big enough, really. We know they were all full. And that's why we're going here. It's the size of a football pitch, and you can put the walls where you want them. It's big. It's really big. So, you know, better non-speaking track space, fully flexible. It fits to us, not to us. You know, it's really awkward going up and down the stairs here, so we want to get rid of
No
that.
crossing the road.
Yeah, crossing the road is a bit, yeah, it's a big hotel. There are cheaper rooms than here, and they're all being refurbished this year. So to us, it made a lot of sense for some additional reasons. There's a pub actually inside the venue. The breakfast buffet and Wi-Fi is included, and there's no crummy bandwidth limits and whatever. So just be good, right? Because we're only just beginning to tell them what you're like.
We didn't get to bandwidth yet.
Yeah, and I'm happy to say that there will be hallway con. There is a goddamn long hallway that is longer than the length of this speaking track, about 8 meters wide. So, so that I think is, you know, we're going to be doing some more work with them to try and get the layout right, and but we are very excited, and I think we're very much looking forward to it. So, I've got some dates for you for 2014, so that you can kind of book holidays, plan your sick days. February the 21st is the opening of the CFP. We're going to do the first round announcements again at 44 Cafe in April. We're going to hold the conference on the 11th and 12th of September next year. And we hope to see you there. We're doing one more event in 2014. It's called Anzen. If you know someone that's going, then they can invite you. If you don't, you need to expand your social circle. It'll be here in London, November time. It might be a good idea, if you're not already on it, to subscribe to the 44Con mailing list. I'm not going to expect you to remember that, but if you go to 44con.com, we do, I think, have a link on the front page-ish, somewhere around there.
There's no duck porn either.
Yeah. Yeah, so it kind of works. We will be putting information about the next year's event on there, hopefully a little bit more frequently this year.
Hospitals permitting, yeah.
Yeah, no breaking again. And that's really it. Really hope to see you in 2014, especially as we've got this new shiny space. Please email us your feedback if you haven't had enough room to scroll on the form. Have a safe journey home or to the office to deal with that crisis you've been putting off for the last 2 days. And enjoy. We're out of here.